let's talk to Catherine Porter, independent energy analyst, because quite frankly, the state of play now with Ed Miliband and net zero is getting out of control. We've got the most expensive electricity in the world, practically, certainly the most expensive in Europe, and it's not even properly feasible to run a furnace, whether it's an electric arc furnace, which is pointless, or whether it's a blast furnace, as it currently is in Scunthorpe. The absolute and utter maniacal price of the electricity and the energy that they need to actually power the place means they're losing £700,000 a day. It's nonsensical. Catherine, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Morning. I've been admiring many of your tweets over the past week or so because you're absolutely nailing the government on the basis that they don't seem to know what they're doing. They've put a guy in charge of British Steel who's literally never run a pub, never mind a British business of any kind whatsoever. He's pretended he was a solicitor. He's a sort of jumped up councillor. I mean, what is going on?
Well, I mean, I don't think that very many people in the Labour Party seem to know. A lot of them are boasting about how they've nationalised British Steel. Yeah. Which actually isn't what they've done.
No, of course they haven't.
They've just taken operational control with the option to nationalise it later on if the owners don't comply with the instructions.
And they don't seem to want to nationalise it. I mean, we find ourselves, I said this to Richard Tice yesterday, in a rather curious situation where a party from considerably right of Labour want to nationalise it, and Labour are actually resisting it.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure why, because at this point, I don't think there's going to be any practical difference. I think the taxpayer is going to be on the hook for quite a lot of money here. And if you look at the condition of the plant, and I'm not really an expert in steelmaking, but what people are saying is that the blast furnaces are getting pretty old. They had some pretty major outages in the last couple of years, and they're going to need some pretty significant investment to make them viable for the long term. Now, as you were saying, there's this huge issue around energy pricing and energy costs, although with the industry supercharger that was introduced by the previous government, steelmakers and other heavy industry are exempt from some of the environmental levies. They still have to pay all of the carbon taxes, the climate change levy and so on. And the estimates of that for British Steel were anything between 200 and 300 million pounds a year. So these are pretty significant costs. And then you have also all these issues around access to raw materials such as coking coal. So I think this is not going to be a trivial problem to solve. It's going to cost the taxpayer a lot of money, and it doesn't really appear that there's any sort of strategy around managing that.
Well, that's the worry that I've got about everything this government does. They don't seem to have any strategy to do anything, really. And this is obviously a very serious problem. It's obviously something that can't be, kind of sorted out with a quick fix. I spoke to James Murray yesterday from the Cabinet, and he didn't seem at all clear as to how much money they would have to put in. He wasn't at all clear as to how long the government would be running it, and he didn't know whether not only the current shipment of coal was going to arrive, and then where the next one was going to come from.
No, I mean, and it's pretty interesting that they're getting this coal from Japan, because Japan really doesn't produce any coking coal anymore. It probably originated from Australia. So it'd make more sense to just go directly to Australia and buy the coal from them rather than going via Japan. But I think that one of the problems we have is that there's really nobody in the Cabinet that has any experience of running a business. So this is going to be a massive challenge for them. And the other problem is that with nationalised industries, and I know this isn't technically nationalised, decisions get made for political reasons rather than for business reasons. So the incentive and the impetus to actually control costs just isn't going to be there in the way that it would with a private enterprise. So there's a potential for this to cost a lot of money to the taxpayer.
Yes. Well, I mean, it could be billions, couldn't it? And also, what we don't yet know is why, and I asked him this question as well, which he didn't have an answer for, why this company are still the main shareholders, given what they're being accused of doing by the government, including practically trying to sabotage the plant.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty extraordinary if what they're saying is true and they were restricting access to raw materials in the hope of a cold shutdown of the blast furnaces, and that would pretty much destroy them permanently. Blast furnaces of that age, if they did have a cold shutdown, it would just be too expensive to bring them back into use. And one of the things that surprises me is that, the government's talking about going to electric arc furnaces here. That's something that's very difficult to retrofit into an existing operation. And then, of course, you lose the ability to produce virgin steel.
Right.
Now, one of the things that Miliband has been wanting to do, obviously, is increase the nuclear capability within the power sector, wanting to build up our nuclear supply chains. You cannot build a reactor pressure vessel with anything other than virgin steel. So if we lose the capability to make that, it's not just within the military that will suffer, because in the same way that you wouldn't make a nuclear submarine out of recycled steel, you wouldn't build a nuclear reactor from one either.
Right. So effectively, it's steel that's not really very much good for anything, is it? I mean, what's the point?
Well, I think there are some lower grade applications for which it can be useful. The problem with the steel that they're talking about with electric arc furnaces is it's made using scrap steel, and you don't really know what's in it.
Right.
So there can be all sorts of impurities in there that affect the end performance, which is why you'd never use it in something really critical like
Right.
a nuclear reactor pressure vessel. And so it's really important that we retain those capabilities for our own national security. You would not want to be relying on imported steel for making your submarines because you just don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
And you're putting yourself then in the hands of people who may not be friendly nations for supply. And I think that in particular relates to the Chinese.
Well, that is a big worry, isn't it? Because the Times have got a story this morning saying that, notwithstanding what's going on in Scunthorpe, Ed Miliband still wants to do very many deals with the Chinese state, with Chinese companies, particularly when it comes to, you know, his net zero fanaticism of building more wind farms with materials all made in China, or solar panel, you know, farms, which are also going to be used by solar panels all made in China.
Yeah, and it's not just the economic impact of that that's the concern. There's also a huge social impact. 60% of the world's polysilicon originates in the Xinjiang province of China, where there are significant concerns around the use of forced labor. And the Labour Party in the UK recently rejected amendments to legislation that would have restricted the use of goods and materials that might have involved the use of forced labor because they prioritize this net zero ambition. But the really annoying thing about this net zero target is it measures only territorial production emissions. So what we're doing is we're reducing the emissions that we create here in the UK by moving our manufacturing to China, where the energy is dirtier. And that means global emissions go up because you have the dirtier energy in China and then you have to ship everything here. So this isn't helping the planet in any way. It's just really a paper target that is harming British industry very significantly, benefiting the Chinese economy and not benefiting the planet.
Yes.
And this is what's so frustrating about it. It's costing us a fortune and actually not achieving anything.
I mean, I was musing on this sort of problem last night, wondering to myself if I was going completely mad when I thought, I wonder if the Chinese just invented net zero to ruin the world's economies and benefit their own, because that appears to be what's happening. I mean, if they didn't invent it, they might as well have done.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're a huge beneficiary of it. They pay lip service to wanting to decarbonise. Their official targets are later than ours. And in the meantime, they've spent, a couple of decades going around the world securing access to raw materials. They control a lot of the supply chains now. They've invested heavily across South America and in Africa to be able to secure access to raw materials that they take back to China for processing. And so they've really embedded themselves within global supply chains, and it's quite difficult to avoid them now in many sectors. If you look at rare earth magnets, they're pretty much the only country in the world that will produce those at scale because they are extremely polluting. They have a tailings sort of river from that's moving at something like 20 to 30 meters per year towards the Yellow River, and it's just destroying the environment there, but they don't care. So yeah, I mean, this is just not good news for everyone else.
No, it really isn't. Catherine, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Catherine Porter, independent energy analyst there.